Well, the work that I do at La Casa Norte was very personal. It's really, I have an opportunity every day to not only make an impact in lives and in the communities that I grew up in, but also to deal with an issue that I personally had experience with. I grew up in Chicago. I'm Mexicano. My mom, I was born and raised in the city of Chicago, but my mom came from Mexico with 8 children. And she came here searching for a better life. When she came, she brought 5 of her kids with her, and then she had me. Most of my life, my mom worked 2 jobs. She's always worked 2 jobs. She went from one to another, always tried to keep food on the table, always tried to keep a roof over our heads, but she wasn't always successful. We bounced around a lot. We moved, we lived with aunts and uncles and friends and family, but we also experienced literal homelessness several times, either in between moves. There were stretches of time that we were living out of our car. We never ended up in a shelter. We never ended up in any kind of housing program, but we moved around a lot. And so we were part of that invisible family. We're one of those invisible families that was experiencing homeless but never got counted. And that's how we grew up most of my life. I grew up thinking that was just how life was and it was normal. By the time I was 20, I was on a path where I was either going to end up dead or in jail. That's just the reality of where my life was. But then I had a daughter, and that for me changed my entire life. I made a promise to that little girl the day that she was born that I was going to change her world, that there was no way that she was going to live the way I was living, that I was not going to allow her to be homeless or to bounce around or to live the way that I did. So I started making changes in my life. And I ended up working at a nonprofit organization in my early 20s. I spent about 12 years there working with children and adults with developmental disabilities and trying to keep a roof over our head. But it wasn't easy. And in my early 20s, I was on the same path my mom was. I was working multiple jobs. I was trying to keep a roof over my head and my daughter's head because we weren't in the same home. There was moments where I had to make a decision between keeping her housed and keeping me housed. And I chose to keep her housed, which meant that in those times, I was bouncing around, staying with friends. I was doubled up. There was moments when I was living out of my own car. Times when I slept at work, I would shower and get ready there. It was interesting because people thought at the job that I was in that I was very dedicated because they would see me get there really early and leave really late. And those were the times where I just didn't have anywhere to go. But I kept going, kept persevering, and for about 10 years, I was in and out of school. I kept working multiple jobs, odd jobs, and it took me really about 10 years where I finally got to a point where I felt like I was stably housed, where I not only could keep a roof over my head, my family, because I had other kids, but I also graduated college. I graduated from Chicago State University, got my bachelor's in business. I ended up using that degree, opened up a ton of other doors for me and other opportunities. And that's really where my entire life changed for the better. But I always took those stories with me. I always brought that with me, that lived experience that I had since I was a kid. And I always knew that I wanted to stay in the social service sector. So I've worked in public health, I've worked for government, I've worked for several nonprofits. And when I got to La Casa Norte, for me, it was like a dream come true because now I got to do something that was directly related to how I grew up.